Hello, I'm Gavin Horgan, Headmaster of Millfield School in Somerset, the largest co-educational boarding school in the UK. Welcome to the Millfield Way Podcast. Here, you'll hear from teachers, coaches and students from Millfield and Millfield Prep School. Millfield is traditionally different, and this is the Millfield Way.
Hello and welcome to this Millfield Way Podcast in conversation with Jono Santry. My name's Liz Webb, and for this episode I'm pleased to be joined by Millfield's Head of Futures, Jono Santry. Today we're going to be focusing on US universities. The US universities pathway has become increasingly popular in the last few years, and at Millfield we have over 100 students applying to study in the US this year alone, with many seeking scholarships worth millions of dollars rather than opting for the UK university system. Now, the US university system is very different to the rest of the world. Jono, can you explain what it is like and the difference between how we should view the UK process to the US process?
No problem, yes. I think if we start off with the UK side of things, hopefully everyone's aware we have UCAS, a beautiful one-stop shop for all applications where students can apply to any universities up and down the country. The focus of this application in the UK is very much on academics. It's on the specific course that they're applying to. So the process essentially is, what GCSEs have you got? What are your predicted grades? Some universities will read a personal statement, but not all. Some may read our reference, but it's a very, very straightforward process that sort of captures everything. The US, on the other side of things, is a much more holistic approach. Every individual is considered in many different areas, and the admissions tutors are really trying hard to shape a cohort of pupils, and they're therefore looking for each student to essentially be the right fit for that cohort. This means the application process is much more complicated, and it is very much tailored to each individual institution. They do have a common app. This common app essentially is their one-stop shop, but within the common app, they also have individual requirements. So to try and make it simple, there is a common app essay. That essay gets sent to all applications. But then additionally, each university may ask for their own supplemental requirements, supplemental essays. It is worth noting on the Common App there are obviously universities out there that don't fit that application system. So the University of California schools, they're not on the system. MIT's not on the system. Georgetown is not on the system. So pupils mixing applications to those schools as well as those on the Common App, obviously it can be quite complicated. In terms of the actual application, it would be the Common App, and within that there would be an activities list, an honours list, academic credentials, SAT results, supplemental essays, and then there's quite an extensive recommendation process that the school get involved in as well, which involves a counsellor reference and 2 to 3 teacher recommendations as well. I guess timeline's worth touching on as well. Thankfully, they do sort of match up with the UK, so it does help us a bit. But the UK early applicants would be applying on the 15th of October. In the US, that's on the 1st of November. The sort of regular round, or what we call in the UK the equal considerations rounds, they're both in January. So that's where we do see some similarities.
Now, I've heard a lot about people applying to US and starting really quite early in comparison to when perhaps we're used to starting to think about university for the UK route, but perhaps starting a lot earlier, maybe even starting to think in year 10 or year 11. Where should students and parents start when they're thinking about this?
I'd say research is absolutely key. The UK system, we've got, I think, 166 degree awarding institutions, and therefore we've got a fairly good grip of those. Over in the US there are 4,000 degree awarding institutions, so our biggest issue, I think, in terms of that research and thinking about it, is that we need to avoid that narrow view of what's on offer over there. So number one tip, come into this process with an open mind. Particularly with the fact that there are more universities out there, believe it or not, than the Ivy League. The Ivy League, for info, it was essentially a group of schools that were really good at sport that came together to create a sports league. it resulted in increased applicant rates, more competitive fields, bigger reputations, and then suddenly powerhouses is what they are right now. But that all stemmed from a sports league back in the day. Outside of the Ivies, there's a whole host of top universities. The QS World Rankings, which is something that I tend to look at, in the top 100 ranked universities in the world, 27 of them are in the US. And when you bear in mind St Andrews, who absolutely fantastic, huge reputation in the UK, St Andrews is ranked 100 in that. I think that gives you sort of a bit of a feel for what we're dealing with. In terms of what people need to be thinking about, there is a huge amount to consider. The sizes of these universities vary enormously. From 300 at Bard College in Massachusetts all the way to 70,000 undergraduates at Central Florida.
Wow.
Location, always talk about location. Popular places for us are the East Coast because of the ease of travel. And then
good
you've got
weather.
The real weather wanters head over to California massively.
Course, yeah.
The beach hunters is what I describe them. But I think definitely thinking about that climate is something. An example of an athletic scholar that I dealt with recently. They were offered a fantastic opportunity in Texas. And when we discussed the temperatures, averaging 30 to 40 degrees Celsius for most of the year, and playing their sport in that temperature, obviously, it didn't work out in terms of that. But huge amounts of research in that field. In terms of what actually happens at Millfield, we're lucky to have this Unifrog one-size-fits-all university destinations tool. It's got a fantastic US universities tool on there, available to parents, available to all of our students. That's a place where I would absolutely send everyone. Looking at those individual websites of the universities is always going to help. And I'd say also for the athletes, the NCAA, who sort of oversee sport over there, they have some really good pages on what sports are being competed at different levels and at different institutions, so you can have a really good feel for what sports are going on over there. And I guess, if you're at Millfield, don't ignore what the Futures Department are sending your way. Lots of events, lots of guest speakers, and a huge amount going on. So those that really engage in the process, they're the ones that get ahead. And
so when should you start doing this research, do you think?
You mentioned year 10, 11. The earlier the better. The easiest applications are often those that are au fait with the US process. Those that perhaps were brought up over there. Those that know all about it. And I think engaging as soon as that is deemed as a possibility, I think getting involved in that research is really important. We formalise the process here at the end of year 11. But we offer events throughout the school at all age groups to try and encourage that exploration, without a doubt. Pupils that leave it to that upper sixth year to make a big decision that I'm going to go for the American thing, they're the ones that really struggle to understand the fit and finding the right fit. And therefore, if I'm honest, there's definitely a correlation between the success of a late applicant as well.
And is there, there's quite an age and potential maturity difference between a 15, 16-year-old and a 17, 18-year-old going through sixth form. So do you find that students tend to have thought at the age 15, 16, I want to go to the US, or is that quite a big step in their minds, and when they get to 17, 18, actually they're a bit more independent and they can see themselves leaving the UK and going to the US? Is there a difference there?
I absolutely, and I think everybody. I think when I'm in front of the different year groups, I know I can tell when I've got the audience with certain aspects, and you will get some at a very early age that have already got where they're heading in their mind. And I think what we try to offer here at Millfield is that opportunity to give them the options and to explore the options as soon as they get here, so that they can start thinking about it. But I would say it's perfectly normal that they don't know exactly where they're going to end up. So our US university applicants often will do a UK application alongside that. An example of a student I dealt with last year had US offers, Canadian offers, European offers and a full set of 5 UK offers to decide from. And it was definitely a case of they weren't sure where they were going to go, and that sort of bide the time to wait for those results. So, I think those that sort of think it might be, totally encourage exploration, but there's absolutely no forced route here, without a doubt.
So it sounds like it's about opening the doors now and keeping those doors open until the point where they've got to make a decision. But if they don't do it early enough, it's going to be a lot harder.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Where
did that student go?
Went to Holland, actually.
Oh, right.
Yeah, a fantastic scholarship offer, and comparative fee costs, I think, would have featured without a doubt.
Yeah. So I also hear a lot of talk about having to have an agent or a consultant to help you get over to the US. Can you talk to us about that?
We've got a bit of a minefield, I think, in terms of that. I think because let's be honest, the finances involved here and the possibilities of scholarships that reduce those finances. There are agents, consultants everywhere. You pop online, do a search, and you can come up with hundreds of them. Personally, I don't think they are needed, though I understand why people do go that way. It's worth noting that at Millfield we support that whole process, so they aren't needed. Many go on athletic scholarships, academic scholarships. I've got fantastic offers without going that way. But some, some go with those consultants and agents and end up with great offers as well. From my perspective, if you put, as much resource together, so long as they're on the same hymn sheet, then it's only improving things. I would say, though, tread carefully. There are some good, I've seen lots and lots throughout my years, some really good people out there, some good companies out there, and there are also some, shall we say, less good. So we always encourage families to feel free to explore that world if that's where they want to go. Meet with lots of agents, meet with lots of companies, get a feel for it, suck as much information out of them all as you can, and then liaise with us, and we can talk about what help and sort of point in the right direction where possible. But most importantly, we always want to be kept part of the loop. We are, as a school, we're a huge part of that admissions puzzle. So those that do go down that consultant agent route, we would still massively be part of that loop.
Okay, fantastic. So what do students need to consider about if they choose the US pathway? What and how will they study, and how is the curriculum different to a UK university?
I personally, I think this is one of the biggest draws outside of going into that crazy sport world. I think it's one of the biggest draws because in the UK, our students are essentially narrowed down and forced to choose one subject. I will use this as an opportunity to sell the liberal arts courses that are growing in numbers in our country that do offer a bit more of a varied approach. But the America, their degree subjects and the opportunities over there, in general, they'll be studying a whole host of different subjects, and essentially not choosing that specialty until second year, perhaps towards the end of their second year. And that the time up until then is a chance to get a taste of lots and lots of different things. Many of them will have core curriculum subjects, and so they might offer some arts, humanities or science classes alongside lots of optional ones. And again, part of that research is really understanding what each university offers, because I don't think people quite realise that they are dramatically different. So Columbia, for instance, has quite a renowned core curriculum. Everybody has to study a group of subjects, and if you look at some of those subjects, they're quite unique and quite quirky, to be honest with you, but you have to study them. And then there are a few optional ones outside of that, whereas Brown is what they call a full open curriculum, where you go there and you choose and you design your curriculum. So I say, I get a lot where people will come and say, I want to apply to, for example there, Columbia, Brown, Princeton, whatever it may be. And I'm thinking, well, do you understand that these are very, very different institutions in terms of what you're actually studying? That research of the curriculum is really important too.
And so how many years are courses in America? Are they most courses in the UK are 3 years at university, unless you're specialising in being a doctor or something like that. What's the situation in the US?
So typically 4 years in length is the sort of the general quota, though there are some that will offer a 5-year curriculum. I guess one thing to note within that, those that are the athletes, the NCAA, who I mentioned that govern the sports over there, their rules are that you can only take part in 4 years of sport. So you have 4 years of eligibility. So if you were part of a 5-year curriculum, you wouldn't be able to play sport throughout those 5. So that is something definitely worth to remember. Quite a lot will go over, I'll be honest, and enjoy themselves for the 4 years and perhaps find masters or post-grad type courses that continue their time over there. So much like the UK.
Okay, fantastic. And so what can a student expect from a day-to-day experience at US Uni? What does a day look like, typically? Roughly.
I mean, I base this on, it's a question I always ask those that I've been part with that have gone over there. I'm always intrigued at what life's over there. I was lucky enough to do a sabbatical last year where I got over to meet students and go to various universities. And I guess the feeling there was very, very dependent on which university you're at. And I guess what your unique brilliance is. Millfield talks about that as part of our values, and actually America is a place where you are massively valued for that, and you end up being hugely part of that. So day-to-day life for a student athlete, for instance, is a really unique experience. It's almost a professional experience. At most levels, they'll be juggling a full, almost professional commitment to support, the training, the gym time, the jumping on a plane and flying over on a jumbo jet to fixtures, but having a tutor on board with you because you've got to still keep up with all the academics as well. That happens. And I'd say, having been at Millfield for, I think, a matter of weeks now, maybe a couple of months now, I can see why many of our athletes head to the US, because they've had the perfect preparation for life over there. And I guess it's no wonder that the coaches over there want to bring our students across the pond. Other experiences include a world where they can immerse themselves in a co-curricular opportunity, a club, a society. And there's an enormous part of student life in the US that revolves around that, and everybody's expected to sort of find their thing. And these experiences often help define the futures of the students. And again, it's no wonder that the Millfield students feel at home when they head over there. Very similar to the expectations here.
So we've got as far as the students decided they want to look at the US, for example. They've looked at the possible universities they might like. They've looked at the curriculum, how that's going to suit them. They've looked at the climate of which part of America they might be going to. And they think that it's for them. So then they're now at the application stage. What are US unis looking for? So how do they go about selecting students to come to their uni?
So as I mentioned earlier, that holistic approach to admissions is the bit to think. I talk about an admissions puzzle that they put together, which involves that common app, the GCSEs, predicted grades, SATs. Is worth noting that Millfield is one of the only schools, I believe, in the country that offers timetabled lessons for SATs. We're well set for that. That was nice to find on arrival. And basically, the admissions team would sit with multiple members of staff responsible for different areas of the application. And I might take the academic side, and I give a grade based on what I deem from the academic side of things. You might be the person that reads the essays, you give them a grade, somebody might give them the sort of the activities list, co-curricular, and then somebody might look at all the references. And between the four of us, we all give a grade based on what we think is right for our university. Obviously those levels will vary at different universities. And then we basically would choose which pile to put them on. Do we want them? Are they to be considered, or are they not the right fit? And then what I hear is there then becomes a cohort juggle where they're trying to almost sell their pupils that they've dealt with each other, and they're dropping people out and putting them back in, and it's vast. The admissions process is just amazing over there because they genuinely seem to care about the human being, what personality they've got, what fit it is, which I find very refreshing compared to the UK admissions process. In terms of fully understanding who gets in where and why, I would massively recommend a book with that exact title, Who Gets In Where and Why, by the New York Times bestselling author Jeff Salingo. Reading that book gives you a really good insight to what those admissions people are looking for. Please go give that a read.
Excellent tip, thank you. And so what are the chances of success? There's an awful lot of applications going to each university. They've got their own home nation students applying, as well as people from all over the world. So if you do go down this route, what are the chances?
I mean, this absolutely depends on where you apply. I think if you wanted to study in the US, you could study in the US. There's 4,000 institutions from top to bottom in terms of academic credentials. If you want to study there, you can study there. But I think when you're talking about, return on investment in terms of how much money it costs to go over there, and the places that some of our students want to aim at, that's when things do get a bit tougher. Let's be really honest about it. It's important to note that last year there were well over 30 US universities that had lower acceptance rates than Cambridge. The field of applicants is often really large for those places, and these competitive universities such as the Ivy League, chances are really, really slim. International students accepted at Princeton last year was 3.8%, Columbia 3.1%, and Harvard 2.5%. Cambridge was 15%. So that really highlights for me the importance of this open mind when researching, and we really encourage our students to take 5 to 10 university choices so that we can get those ambitious options as well as the safe ones. That being said, we do want our students to be ambitious, and as many of them have those strings to their bow, as I've alluded to, our acceptance rates would massively look favourably on those percentages. This year we've already got students holding offers at Stanford, UPenn, Princeton, Yale and UChicago, fantastic institutions. And this is all, this is as well as 30 to 40 offers that we've already got in, and we haven't even got the decisions from the regular round, which is where the vast majority of offers will come in. So chances of success, so long as it's targeted right, should be good.
And so just talking about getting those decisions coming through, what time of the year do they come through? I think you might have mentioned earlier.
Yeah, so because of the various rounds, they have this early round where they apply in November, and we've tended to hear back by January time for that. And then the regular round, which generally is a January deadline, we tend to hear around March time. So the next few weeks will be a big few weeks for the vast majority of our applicants.
Okay, great. And so what part does sport play? Sport is big business in America. So how does it fit into the whole process? And we hear about students getting full ride scholarships to certain universities based on, I think, their talent level in sport often. How often does that happen? And let's just explore the whole thing of sport in the US.
I allude to the strings of the bow and the individual brilliance. Millfield has got a wide variety of students in this regard. It's worth noting that many do go on academic scholarships or for their strength in art, music, drama, fashion, to name a few. And it goes without saying that our athletes do hold an amazing hook, as the US admissions department put it. So it's no surprise that I think that last year it was well over 20 of our students went on US athletic scholarships. Those that don't know US sport, it is a cultural identity. And university level sport is often played in front of enormous crowds, facilitated by an unrivaled financial backing. And if you've not, you pop onto TV and look at it, but if ever you're over there, go and look at the stadiums that some of these universities have got, and it really gives you a feel for what's going on. And that NCAA I talked about, they've got over 1,000 member schools. and who all plough a huge amount of money into sport, who value their sport enormously. Probably worth me touching on divisions, because I think a lot of people talk about these sporting divisions over there. We love like in football, Premier League, Championship, etc. In America, there's Division 1, Division 2 and Division 3 for sports. Those divisions aren't dictated by who's the best at what sports. They're essentially dictated by the financial resources that those institutions are willing to put into them. So the Division 1 schools will be those that predominantly have an enormous American football or an enormous basketball program. They're the ones that will have those jumbo jets and fly people around the country. Division 2 will not have as much in terms of those resources, but the facilities still at Division 2 are phenomenal. Many Division 2 teams beat the Division 1 teams in various sports and activities. So again, the open mind thing, don't judge the divisions is what I would definitely say. And then there's also Division 3, which is basically the class as the academic division. Somewhere like NYU. NYU was a place that I visited last year. I got to join in a couple of sessions with the footballers there. And there was a Mexican under-21 international in their team, but he was also working towards a PhD in some amazing bit of research that he was doing. And in that world, it's, I've got my lecture today, so I'm going to do my lecture, so I might be a bit late for training. The academics comes first, but it doesn't mean that the sport is not. It's still very, the standard is still very, very good. Worth noting that at Division 3, they don't do athletic scholarships. So, I mean, from that, sport can provide some amazing opportunities for the students, there's no doubt. For many, they use it to get into the top academic university, so it can create an easier route or more likely route in. So the Ivy Leagues, for instance, they don't do athletic scholarships, but having that athletic hook can get you into the into those sort of places. Harvard, for instance, has got approximately 100 students from the UK, top to bottom. So across their 4-year groups, there's only 100 students there. Incredibly, around half of these are student athletes. So either, to get into Harvard, you either need to be obscenely clever or pretty academic and an elite athlete. So I think that says a lot. One of the biggest pulls, though, is definitely that access to scholarship money. With the cost of studying in the US potentially ranging, I hate to say it, $20,000 all the way up to 80. Some talk about even up to $100,000 at some of these places. Which, by the way, their price tag does include everything.
Is that
That's
year?
not just that per year.
Yeah.
Exactly. But that includes accommodation. The price tags they put on is literally everything involved. So a scholarship can have an enormous impact on that viability of studying in the US. And whilst many universities will offer need blind or need aware financial aid, athletic scholarships are the big money game, as you put it. And it's safe to say if a coach over there for a certain sport has funding and they really want to recruit an athlete, they really want them part of their team, the offer can be substantial.
And when you talk about athletic, you mean any sport, not
Absolutely.
Just athletics as we know it in the UK.
I sometimes slip into American terminology. I think I've avoided calling it soccer so far, which is good. But the term athlete would definitely any sport, any activity.
And if you go over on an athletic scholarship, do they try and turn you into an American footballer?
I've had that experience with some of my recruits. I had a cricketer that went over into an area that cricket's not a big thing over there, but it's in an area that wanted to sort of bring it to the fore, and within weeks he was he was a big lad and drafted in for that. American football is enormous, so yes, beware any of you going over there that track athletes can be renowned for that. Somebody that's a quick 100-meter runner. Don't be surprised if you're getting a tap on your shoulder.
Football in their hand and they're running as fast as they can.
Absolutely.
With a helmet on.
Yeah.
So can you talk us about a particular student's journey and the steps that they took?
talk about, again, football. Football's how I got into this. So I apologise. I use in lots of football analogies, but I had a player whom I'd worked with for many years on and off the pitch. He started his research very early. I think he's fortunate enough to have a parent that was back and forth from the US. He got to visit quite a lot. He got a feel for it while he was over there. He watched some sports fixtures. He got the US bug, is what I would absolutely say. And he initially had some really ambitious universities on his list, but he recognised the opportunities that might come from widening his search. So he worked really hard for his GCSEs, excellent SAT results, some solid A-level predictions. I'd say his essays he wrote were really personal, and they truly reflected his values, and I really enjoyed that process with him, because when you read something that's been written from the heart, that's about them, that's personal, that tells you about them, you can imagine yourself being an admissions tutor thinking, this is great. On the football side of things, we worked to create a short but hard-hitting show reel, as well as a playing CV that he shared with coaches very early on. And I encouraged him throughout to be really persistent in updating those coaches on his progress on and off the field. They don't always get back to you, but that doesn't prevent you from sending them another email to say, I've just achieved this, or I've just done this in a game, whatever it may be. And he's now sitting on a sizable athletic scholarship from a D1 university. And we've got 2 top academic institutions that are basically offered him a place on their soccer roster. So he's got both options right now, and he's left with that big decision now. Does he take the scholarship and go to a top footballing university, but it's not quite so academic, or does he go for the top academic offer but without the scholarship money? Either way, absolutely no doubt it will be a good fit for him, and it will be an amazing experience wherever he goes.
I'd like to just touch on SATs. You were talking there. How does that process work? When do students sit SATs? Do they have more than one chance to sit them? If they don't, is it a one chance exam, or are there a few opportunities? How does that work? Good
question. So we it's part of our lower sixth timetable, and essentially you can have multiple sittings, and we are one of the few test centres in the country as a school, so our students would sit the test here as well. We all sit the SAT. It's a digital one now. It's very user friendly, and we value it enormously. And essentially you can sit it multiple times. We tend to limit that as much as possible, because we reminding them that they still need to be doing A-levels or whatever qualifications they're doing. But they can gradually improve that. I think it's worth noting that whole test optional that's going on in America, so that not everybody is going to be asking for you to absolutely submit that test. Most are test optional right now, and that means for me the SAT needs to sort of really boost your academic profile. So not all get put on the application. But I'd say a really good SAT score that sits higher than your academics is always going to benefit an application.
And what are they testing in the SATs?
Maths and English. So we are, the way we teach it, we've got each student would have a maths lesson, English lesson based on those sections of the paper. I would say that whilst our mathematicians do tend to do quite well and find it easy, it's not as straightforward as I'm good at maths, I'm good at English, I'm going to sit the SAT. A bit like driving a car, you've got to figure out the style of question, understand the system, understand how it's adaptive. It's an adaptive test depending on how well you've been doing. So there's a lot of that, but yeah, we absolutely prepare all of that ahead of those tests.
So do they recognise BTECs as well as A-levels when you're applying to the US?
I'll be really careful with what I say here, because I think as a futures department we've got a duty to be really transparent with everyone, and so that people know where they stand. As a country, as a group of people that I work with in terms of advising, we are working hard to make sure that the US understand the rigour of the BTEC, but that is something that is only gradually growing right now. In general, the most competitive universities over there will need students to be studying at least 3 A-levels. That being said, there's still, as I alluded to earlier, there's still a whole host of fantastic universities out there that do recognise them. And I think also if you put alongside some good SAT scores and perhaps one of those hooks that there are ways in. But I think if that's a conversation, we're keen for those conversations very early on. Tonight I'll be presenting to Year 9 parents about future decisions around GCSEs, BTECs, etc., and that will be part of what's delivered. But I think researching the entry requirements for those individual places is something I'd totally advise, because they all run their own admissions process. They all choose what they want to choose, and we just need to make sure we're not limiting options as a result of what we're doing.
Yeah, okay. And then what about Canada? And I've put Europe, which is obviously another whole conversation probably. But is the Canadian system similar to the US or different? How does that work?
Canada has grown enormously in popularity in the last few years. And I talked about the group of advisors. We were all taken to the Canadian embassy, and were presented with basically a real push from the Canadians to recruit in the UK, and it's a big thing for them. So you can see why it's partly why it's getting more popular. In general, the cost in Canada is a lot lower. I will say there are some that are very Americanized. Toronto, for instance, the prices are up there with America, but there are some that are very affordable. If you've ever been to Canada, what an amazing place. Totally be on my list without a doubt. The process of application to Canada is very, very straightforward. Sometimes not even looking at predicted grades, sometimes not even asking for any references from school. What have you achieved so far to date? We'll look at your application. So a Canadian application is very easy to do alongside what we've got going on, which is great. And again, the sport thing there is, it's not quite full on America, but it's not far off in some places. It really is a big thing, and it is often another way of getting yourself into some of the institutions over there.
And is it the same kind of sports popular there, or varies slightly?
Yeah, again, the sort of the typical Canadian, the ice hockeys and that kind of thing sit at the front, but the basketballs and also American football sits there. But they're growing that, so they're more team sports. The more and more hockey going on there, soccer. I've said it. More and more of that as well, and they're keen to. They're keen to keep up with the Americans, I think, is what's going on.
Okay, so potentially some good opportunities there that might be easier.
Absolutely.
Fantastic.
And you mentioned Europe.
Yeah.
Again, massively growing in numbers because of the cost. Vast majority of European universities sit more favourably than the UK prices. So absolutely a place to be looking. Advising the European application is quite tough because they are very different. Even within one country, they might have multiple different types of application, and trying to keep abreast of what everybody's doing and requiring. Some will require CVs, online interviews, 3-minute video submissions, whatever it may be. One to mention, I think Bocconi in Italy, they require the SAT or to sit their version of the SAT. So again, I think that the common theme from this is that early research and understanding what's required to get into those places.
Fantastic. Okay, so my final question that we do on all of the podcasts. Thank you for all the information that you've given us. There's lots of really useful information. I'm sure our listeners will be grateful for hearing. What are your 3 key takeaways, Jono?
I'd say number one would be early engagement, early research as wherever possible. As soon as you or your family feel that the US might be for you, get involved, get on the website, get onto Unifrog, do some research and start exploring what's out there. Alongside that, number 2, I'd say that open mind is really key. If you've done your research, you'll have seen far more universities out there and seen the strengths of many of them, and then your university shortlist would look much more realistic in terms of where you're picking. And I guess finally, we're here to help our doors are open. We at Millfield, we're very used to supporting this, and we've got large numbers of it. And if you want to come and talk to us in the Futures department, please do. We look forward to helping you.
Thank you, Jono. That's been really, really useful information, which I'm sure our listeners will be really appreciative of hearing from you. I hope you have enjoyed this episode of the Millfield Way podcast in conversation with Jono Santry. Thank you and